Okay, good morning everybody. Again, 7 o'clock in the morning. Good time for me at least. That's one of the benefits of being retired too, is being able to kind of get your time available for what you need it for and have some free time. And a lot of my time is free these days. Well, the topic today has to do with the bilges. Now, most of you will be unaware of what a bilge is, so I'm going to have to do give a little background here. Having been in the Navy and in the Coast Guard, my job as a boilerman was located down near the bilges. In fact, there's a steel grating that you walk on just down the lowest part of the ship. The lowest part of the ship is called the keel. It's that straight member that goes the full length of the ship. Excuse me. And then the sides of the ship come down and connect at the keel. And if there's water that spills into the ship, it goes down into what that's called the bilge area. If you've ever been on a rowboat, you know, typically there's a kind of a grate that's at the bottom you put your feet on, but so you don't have to put them at the very bottom, because usually there's water that comes in and collects there on the bottom along the keel, and often you have to bail that out, especially if too much water comes into your rowboat, or what happens, your rowboat will sink. Well, on a big ship, like a Coast Guard cutter that I was on, and every ship, as far as that goes, there is in that which collects, the liquid which collects, could be water, seawater, it could be oil, all kinds of different residues or liquids, come down and eventually get down into the keel, above the keel. It's called bilge water. I'll read just a couple of things I found on this in considering this topic I'm going to talk about today. Bilge water can be found aboard almost every vessel. Depending on the ship's design and function, bilge water may contain water, oil, urine, detergents, solvents, chemicals, particles, and other materials. The water that collects is often noxious, meaning ugly. And bilge water, or just bilge, has thus become a derogatory colloquial term used to refer to something bad, fouled, or otherwise offensive. And unless the bilge is cleaned out occasionally, the term bilged refers to the deliberate flooding of the bilge in order to incapacitate the ship, to slow its speed, or make it difficult or impossible to handle. Keep that in mind as I go on, because we're going to talk about bilge brains. That term, bilge brain, was coined by my wife, Mary Jo, as I talked to her about this topic. And she said, "Oh, you're going to talk about bilge brains." I never heard the term before, so this one's for Mary Jo, that term. Shortly after I was baptized, so we go back to that point in time, baptism was like cleaning out the bilges for me. And as I referred to earlier, in the convulsion I felt as it left my body, the bilge water left my body, and I felt clean as a result of the baptism. Well, I discovered, as I think probably anybody discovers, that It may take care of the bilge water, but it doesn't take care necessarily of the functioning of the brain and how the brain operates. Because the habits that I had of how I was thinking and what I was thinking about included, before baptism, bilge stuff, noxious thoughts, which were incapacitating me as far as living a better life, slowing me down, those ugly thoughts that were in my head before. The term bilge refers to the flooding of the bilge in order to incapacitate the ship, slow its speed, make it difficult or impossible to handle. Very appropriate to what I discovered shortly after being baptized. Standing my customary watch down in the boiler room. Nothing to do, just look at gauges, write down reports every hour, and think. And the thinking I discovered was not taken care of by the baptism. The thinking was still there. And what I thought in my head was up to me, as it is for all of us. And what were the thoughts that started coming into my head? The old thoughts. Old bilge stuff. Thoughts that I didn't want to have there anymore. That I resisted. I didn't want to think those thoughts. And these were the thoughts I was thinking before I was baptized. That I'd been thinking for years. Bilge stuff. So what do? Well, I don't want it. I want it to stop. But how do you stop things from going on in your head that you don't want to have go on? For example, the kinds of things you don't want to go on in your head have to do with what is found in Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 and 28. A man who commits adultery in your heart or your head, it's as if you were committing adultery in the flesh. Well, adultery ain't exactly the kind of thing that someone who wants to live a good life, a clean life, a virtuous life, wants to have going on. So what do you do with these non-virtuous thoughts, these bilge thoughts that continue to go on in your head when you don't want them there? I discover what you do. Over a period of about 3 weeks. So it isn't something you do immediately. You snap your finger and the thought goes away. Oh, I don't want to think that. I think what happens more often is that you say, well, that's an unacceptable thought in my head. I better get rid of that. And so, okay, well, I won't think it anymore. And the thought comes back. It's not that easy. In fact, it's extremely difficult. As I discovered, and as probably many of you have discovered or will discover as time goes by. So how do you get the bilge out of your head? Well, I didn't know. Never really made an effort before, a serious effort. Just assumed that was kind of normal, natural. But what do? Well, I'll put something else in my head. I'll sing a song. I'll recite a poem. And so I started doing this that first evening. This is the first real effort, real effort that I put into it. And the thought is there. A thought comes that I don't want to have there. It's an old thought. It's something that's been there before, often to do with sexual issues. And so I start singing a song. I pick a good song. Church hymn is a good song because of the religious implications and the directions that those thoughts will take you, can take you. I start singing. As a thought goes on in my head, start singing. Whatever the song may be, just whatever comes. Near, my God, to thee, near to thee, or whatever of a good vein, not just any old song, but a good spiritual song. And as I did, the thought's gone. Well, that wasn't so tough, was it? Boom! And the thought's back again. Now, my guess is most of you have experienced this as you've made the effort. The thought just doesn't go away, period. It returns. Well, do it again. And on like that. And keep it going. Is the thought gone? Yeah, it's gone. Boom! And it's back again. Well, I guess I'm not going to be able to get rid of it that way. It just keeps coming back. That is the thinking that I think has developed, that if you don't want to have a thought and you try to focus on it, it will keep coming back. So you don't want to keep focusing, just give up. I believe that's the thinking that develops in a lot of people who experience this. But Wesley Craig, because of what I've been through, has a stubborn streak. And having this stubborn streak, if I could wish any streak on any of you who might listen, who need this information, it would be, don't give up. Don't give up. No matter how many times it takes to insert the good thought, the song, the poem, whatever it is that you're putting in there that's positive in nature, powerfully positive and good, don't give up. I don't know, I wasn't counting that night, and that night is still in my memory, but I wasn't counting. My guess is that I must have input that thought again and again, the song, over and over, probably at least 30 times before my first win came, where the thought didn't come back that night. 30 times. But that's just your first battle. At least it was for me. My guess is it is for most people. Because the next time I'm down on watch and have all this time to kill, eventually my mind begins to gravitate to a thought just like it. Well, I know what I've been through the first night, so I know it is possible to have success. It might take me a good long time to do it, but I'm not going to give up, and so I start the same process over again. Over and over and over and over and over. But it doesn't take me quite as long this second time as it did the first time before I have the success of the thought not coming back in my head. In fact, as time goes by and I reflect, it's about half the time it takes me the second time. And the next time I'm back in the boiler room, close to the bilges, where I'm actually pumping out the bilge in my brain, in my bilge brain, it takes about half that time, the time preceding. So begin to figure 30, 15, 8, 4, 2. It follows a progression like that, until it gets down to the point where, as a thought begins to come into my mind, I recognize it and I snap my finger or my tongue against the roof of my mouth. These are ways I develop personally to deal with the emergence of the thought at the very outset. Alert, 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 alert. It's there. And then that's all it takes, and the thought is gone. The thought is gone. A snap of the finger, a click of the tongue, and the thought is gone. That is my victory over the bilge of my mind. I'm able to pump it out immediately upon recognition. That, hey, it's Bill's thought, gone. 21 years old, I discover that. Years later, I become a psychotherapist. I work with people who have problems with bilges in the brain. For some of them, it's not sexual. For some of them, it's just depressive thoughts. And I introduce them. This is called cognitive therapy, widely used by therapists, cognitive therapists, psychotherapists across the world. But I found out, age 21, before anyone ever taught me, or the possibility, or how to do it, how to pump the bilges nearly automatically. So what has that done? It has kept the noxious stuff out of my head. I'm able to be in a situation where it would typically gravitate. You go to a beach, you see a beautiful lady in a bikini. Well, yeah, you see that. You see that, nearly that, when you go to a basketball game and watch cheerleaders. Depending upon the school, depending upon the amount of flesh that they're allowed to show. And if you don't have any bilge cleaning equipment handy, for the average male, I would assume the average male, bilge thoughts begin to emerge. And they lead to what Christ said: a man who looks upon a woman to lust after her in the flesh, in his mind, in his heart, it is as if he is doing it in the flesh. And adultery, by anyone, adultery is considered to be especially offensive to God, or to us in terms of our efforts to reach God, to have a more of a spiritual life. Well, what would I add to that? I'd add to that an experience I had just 5 or 6 years ago. I was serving a mission in the 12-step program for the LDS Church, where people with addictions are provided an opportunity of being able to rid themselves in an excellent way, to get rid of the bilge water, to change their lives, to get rid of not only alcohol and drugs as addictions, but pornography as well. And I worked with groups as a missionary, not as a therapist. As a missionary, helping to organize the groups and holding them, being responsible for what goes on. And in one of the groups which I handled for a year, there were two young men who I knew personally, who were not in my ward stake, but who I'd known professionally. They were therapists working with adolescents. Good men. But they were there as members of this. They had come to seek help for their addictions that they developed in pornography. Now these are therapists. They're people who are trained, skilled in the use of cognitive therapy, but they found it, for whatever reasons, impossible. They slipped into it, like so many do, into pornography. It's so rampant, it's so prevalent. Go into your computer and boom, it can be there that quickly. Even when you're not looking for it, it can be there, or lead to it very quickly. So they were there because they were battling the battle of the minds. They were attempting to get rid of the bilge water. And give them credit. They weren't just sliding by and making it appear that they were okay. They had acknowledged that it wasn't okay. It was getting in their way. And if two young therapists can be in that situation, then the ordinary person, tough. So what I've done at this time is to provide you with the opening to with the skills you need to be able to get rid of the problem you may have or may be confronted with at a future time. And if you want to know more about that, want more detail, drop me a line or give me a call, send me an email, whatever. Be happy to talk with you about it. Okay, well, so I find that the biggest victory that I have in my life is not in a basketball game, it's not in bowling, it's not learning how to do something else. It's the victory of the bilge, the victory over the bilge. And fortunately, my pump equipment still works well. Yeah, I have to call on it occasionally. I have to make sure. I have to click my tongue on occasion. That never just completely goes away. We live in a society that's too eroticized to think that you can escape or just hide away from this stuff. It's there. So get your bilge equipment working, pumping out so that you don't collect it. That's my suggestion for you today. It's made a difference in my life, tremendous difference in my life, because of learning that when I was 21 years old. Bye to you, friends.